Hey everybody, in this video I raided 100 Slayer Corrupted Dungeons and tracked the rewards. I'm going to be comparing some of the results to some of my previous videos on 100 solo dungeons, specifically the 8.1 solo dungeons map video, so I'll put that link in the description below. Now a quick disclaimer before the video starts, this video was done purely for science and does not represent my position on raiding corrupted dungeons. I don't condemn rats because I understand why they do it, however I don't think ratting should be a thing in the first place, and the purpose of this video was to gather data to support that opinion. Okay, so I'm going to start by going over my build and some stats for these 100 corrupted dungeons. If you just care about the loot, you can follow the timestamp on screen here. So for my build, I wanted to balance clear speed with survivability, so I ended up going with the one-handed spear. Bear paws were a close second, but I decided on the one-handed spear just because I like the weapon better. I think if you wanted to go for full clear speed, the light crossbow would likely be the best option for that. So with the one-handed spear, I used a mist collar as my offhand. This is a great option because it gives you a lot of CDR, which helps you both with your clear speed and also if you get invaded, helps you escape with all that reduced cooldown on your run and your E. For my chest, I used a mage robe because it has the highest base damage bonus and I didn't really need an offensive ability on my chest for clearing, as well as the mage robe can be helpful in certain situations when you're escaping to purge off any buffs of attackers. For the helmet slot, I went with the Cultist Cowl. The Cultist Cowl is amazing because its ability gives you really high damage on mobs, especially bosses. Single target damage is quite great, and then when you get invaded, you can switch to the Cloth Cowl's second ability and bop your opponents away if they get too close. For my boots, I tried a couple different options, and we'll talk about this more later in the video. However, I settled on soldier boots as their ability is really good for creating gaps on your opponent when you get invaded. For my cape, I started with a Thetford cape but moved onto a demon cape later, as it's just very helpful for clearing, and then it's also just better for breaking crystals quickly, as you really don't auto attack when you're being invaded unless you're hitting a crystal, which just gives you more overall damage on that crystal. For the food, I went with Black Bog Clam Soup, which is essentially just a fancy regen food that gives you both energy and health regen, which is helpful for the one-handed spear build that I'm using because it does have a little bit of energy problems. For my potions, obviously I had tier 4 poison potions for the clear, and then I also brought invisibility potion swaps in case I got invaded, which were quite helpful in many situations. Starting off with our stats, we have the Infamy that I started and ended with, as this affects the loot that you get in corrupted dungeons. So I started with 468,000 Infamy, which is plus 57% loot on Slayer corrupted dungeons, and ended with 615,000, which is plus 63%. So not a huge change. On average, I had around plus 60% bonus loot. So in total, all 100 dungeons took me pretty much right on 10 hours, which gives us 6 minutes per dungeon on average. 6 minutes average per dungeon is quite fast compared to solo dungeons, which is quite nice as you get much more dungeons out per hour. Moving on to the breakdown of chests, in total there's 275 loot chests and 117 fame chests, so a little bit over 2 times the loot chests as the fame chests, but much more fame chests than you'll see in solo dungeons. For the loot chest, there's 111 green, 101 blue, 56 purple, and 7 gold chests. The 7 legendary really stood out. I'm not sure if I got lucky or if this is just average for corrupted dungeons. I need to do even more to get a more accurate measure of that, but there does seem to be quite a few legendary chests in corrupted dungeons, at least for the loot chests. For the fame chest, on the other hand, I had 71 green, 41 blue, and 5 purple. Notably, once you start hitting the purple chests, they give the tradable tomes of insight and not the beginner tomes of insight. In total, I received 3,329 beginner tomes of insights from the green and blue fame chests. Looking at the amount of times invaded now, in all 100 corrupted dungeons that I raided, I was only invaded 6 times, which is quite low compared to what I expected, and it even gets more crazy than that. 4 of these invades were right as I was finishing up the 2,000 points. Pretty much I was either on the last mob or about to engage the last mob to get the 2,000 points in and the invades fade of the corrupted dungeons, and 2 of them I think were bugs because I got invaded in the first 30 seconds. I'm not 100% sure on how the invades fade works, but I'm pretty sure that if you don't activate the shrine, which I wasn't, you shouldn't be able to be invaded within the first minute or 2 of your dungeon. That being said, if we take the 6 invades at face value then, it's around 1 in every 17 dungeons that you get invaded. If that bug is a bug and it gets fixed, then it would be around 1 in every 25, only getting invaded 4 times in the 100 dungeons. All this being said though, the amount of times that you get invaded will be directly proportional to how fast you clear. The longer it takes you to clear, the more likely you are to get invaded. If we ignore those 2 weird sort of bugged occasions and just look at the other 4, hypothetically, if I were to speed up my clear by say around 30 seconds, I could have theoretically never gotten invaded in a single one of these corrupted dungeons. Judging from this data, I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect somebody to be able to create a optimized clearing build, like the light crossbow for example, run it in 8.3 and clear the dungeons so fast that they literally never get invaded without those bugged occasions. Moving on now, with those 6 invades in mind, I actually died in 3 of those invades, so half the time I died when I got invaded. However, dying half of the time seems quite unlikely to me, as all of my deaths were very unlucky. In the first death, I was testing out Boots of Valor, which give you a massive speed boost when you get hit with a CC. Corrupted dungeons have a ton of mobs and traps that CC you, so often you just get a super fast run on a low cooldown. However, I just happened to be in one of the dungeons that had literally no CC mobs, and so my boots were practically useless, and I died to a sword player who had that constant move speed. I also had this death where I tried to turn around and kill my opponent because he was low. I got a little bit cheeky and overconfident and miscalculated by just a tiny little bit. The last death was to an 8.3 Deathgivers player who hit a literal pixel perfect max range shadow edge at the very end of his boots duration and one-shot me. So all that is to say is that realistically, if I were to be using soldier boots for all 100 of the dungeons and just focusing on escaping, I would have died 1 in 100 times, or 1 in 6 invades. Moving on to look at fame now, the total fame that I received from all 100 corrupted dungeons was 13.68 million, which brings us to around 1.37 mil fame per hour. Comparing this to 8.1 soul dungeons, which are some of the top tier soul dungeons for fame, it's exactly the same. However, that being said, this doesn't include the beginner tome of insight drops from the fame chests. The corrupted dungeons yielded 3,329 beginner tomes of insight, or around 3.3 million fame, whereas the 8.1 solo dungeons only yielded 895 beginner tomes of insight, so it is significantly higher fame per hour if you include those beginner tomes of insight. If we were to include those in our fame totals, that would bring our total fame up to 17 mil, or our fame per hour at around 1.7 mil per hour. This puts raiding Slayer Corrupted Dungeons at one of the best fame activities in the game, and as far as I know, the best solo fame method outside of doing super high tier solo dungeon maps like 7.3s or 8.2, 8.3s. Okay, so moving on now to take a look at the loot. The main thing that I noticed in terms of the loot compared to some of the solo dungeon videos I've done in the past is that the quantity of tier 9 to tier 11 items, even tier 8 items as well, was just a lot higher than I got for solo dungeon videos, even for like the 8.1. So let's start with the gear tabs here. Two tabs worth of gear. You can see the 8.1 pole hammer there. I got an 8.3 life touch staff somewhere here. Yeah, right there. 8.3 life touch staff. That was probably the biggest single item that I got, totaling at around 2.26 mil there. Then so a lot of more tier 8 stuff in the helmets, 8.1 there, 8.2 scholar robe. Moving on to the second gear tab here, we've got some nice royal armor there, and 8.1 guardian armor, just really a lot of high tier stuff. In total, these two gear tabs come to a total of 13.52 million. Moving on to the capes and bags, I have them in my inventory here. You can see that they're at a total of 5.29 mil there, with an 8.3 undead cape is the biggest one there. A lot of high tier sort of faction capes and special capes making up a lot of the money, and then high tier bags as well. 2 8.1s, 1 satchel, 1 normal bag, as well as a lot of other tier 8s as well. So 5.29 mil around there in the capes and bags, very good. Moving on to the miscellaneous stuff, we have first the bags of silver, a lot of silver bags here. These in total add up to 7.42 million in silver bags, so again, quite high. And then for the rest of the miscellaneous stuff, the really key items here, 99 tomes of insight, that's quite a lot of money. Quite a lot of high tier maps here as well, that add up quite a bit. And then just high tier runes and relics, got a lot of tier 8 runes, only 1 tier 8 relic, which is a little bit unlucky, but 16 tier 8 souls, and then quite a lot of tier 7 ones, 32 tier 7 relics. 90 tier 7 souls, and then just other miscellaneous stuff. Not too much. I didn't pick up any of the tier 4 city treasures because they're sort of not really worth it with their weight and costs being so high and low respectively. But in total, the miscellaneous stuff comes to a total of 10.27 mil. So in total, if we add up all of these, the total price check for the 100 corrupted dungeons was 36.54 million, which comes down to an average of around 365k for every dungeon that you do on average, and then an average of around 3.65 million per hour. If we want to compare this to the solo dungeon videos that I've done in the past, around the highest amount of money per hour that I made doing solo dungeons was around 2 mil, a little bit over 2 mil per hour. So this is significantly higher than any solo dungeon money making that I've done in the past. That being said, I did die 3 times, so if we want to minus the amount I lost for the deaths, each of my sets was worth around 1 million silver, so we can minus around 3 mil for the deaths there. That brings our total at around 33.5 mil total and around 3.35 mil per hour, which is still far superior than the solo dungeons that I was doing. If you were to go maybe in a faster clearing build, never get invaded, never die, we could expect the total money to maybe reach even around 40 mil with around 4 mil per hour. Okay, so at this point in the video, normally I'd sort of give my thoughts and go over whether I thought these were worth it, but judging from the results, I mean, they're obviously just insanely good. Only getting invaded 6 times makes them very safe compared to what I previously expected, and the rewards are just better than every solo dungeon you could ever hope to do. Really, I have a lot of very strong opinions on this, so I'm going to dedicate an entire another video to talking about my thoughts on this and what I think the changes should be made or put into place to sort of fix this insane money and fame per hour. That being said, that's all for this video, so if you enjoyed it, make sure you give a subscribe or like or do whatever, I don't care, and I will see you in the next video.